Hey, it's Jake. Welcome back to my tech booth here at South Fellowship Church. In this video, I want to highlight one of my favorite new updates for ProPresenter 7. And that update is the ability to now create macros for your ProPresenter projects. First, we'll talk about what are macros, and then I'll show you how I've set them up for a typical Sunday here at our church. And then we can also cover some hypothetical use cases for them because it really opens up a whole lot of other possible scenarios for automating things in your worship ministry. So here in ProPresenter 7, you can see on the right side of the window where you used to just have audio and props and your timer. Now you have macros. I actually think they added some of these other tabs here too as well. I like how they've, in general, have just made better use of the right bottom portion of the user interface now. Before I felt like it was just good for like audio playlists, but now you have macros here, which is a game changer. So when you start taking a look at these different macros here I have in this list of macros, you'll start to get an idea of what they accomplish. So a macro will combine multiple actions within ProPresenter into basically one click or one action. So see how this first macro says set up scrolling announcements? This is the macro that I'm gonna apply to the document in our ProPresenter playlist that has our announcement slides before and after service. And I can click and drag this onto the slide. I already did, and you can see here the black letter M here that indicates the macros. And within this macro, instead of having to add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different actions to this slide by going right click, add action, and then adding all the various actions, now I can just have one macro right here that I can click and drag onto my slide in my document, and it's ready to go. So you'll see we have an action here for our stage display. We have an action for queuing up our pre-service music, an action for the look we want to have applied to our screens, and then also our countdown timers. We want to make sure those are active before the service starts. And then we also have a MIDI note action queue that queues ProPresenter running on another computer to control our center screen. I have a macro for our song looks, so I want to make sure we have the right look applied to our screen outputs, as well as our stage display is showing the lyrics in a format that our band wants to see them. And then also a simple clear all command that I like to have at the beginning of songs just to make sure you don't have any background music or anything like that going into the beginning of a worship song. We have a macro for our sermon bumper. This one has audience looks applied, it has stage display looks applied, and then also it has a MIDI cue to cue light key to bring down the lights for our sermon bumper video. Then we have another macro for the actual sermon when pastor gets up to preach, so the lighting changes. We want to make sure again that our stage display is appropriate for when he's preaching and the way that he likes it. Some of these actions you'll notice are a little bit redundant. I just always like to make sure at the beginning of every one of these documents you have the right settings pulled up. And then one more macro for another type of document we have for our live in-person announcements here. This isn't a super complex concept, but it's one that I've wanted ProPresenter to have for quite a while now, especially I feel like as time goes on, I keep using more and more of the automation features in ProPresenter. There's a lot going on within this application. You can use it for just presentation software, but you can also use it for live streaming, for video switching, all sorts of stuff. So it's a really powerful production software, a lot more than just presentation software at this point. But as it gets more complicated, you want to have quick ways to perform multiple actions, especially if you're doing this every single Sunday. So as I continue to scroll down my macros folder here, now you'll see we have some different lighting scenes that I have programmed into here. So these macros are simply a MIDI note that's sending MIDI information to our computer, running light key right over there, and then it's going to queue up one of the cues that we have set up in the light keys. I have screen share pulled up right here so you can see what's going on that computer with light key. So if I hit lights red, it's going to queue up our red look. If I hit lights amber, yellow, blue, purple, and then white. So this is cool for someone who's running ProPresenter if they want to be able to queue up lights on the fly, because that's another great thing about macros is you can activate them independently of whatever slides or documents you have in your playlist. You can just queue them up directly from the macros bin. Or if someone is setting up our documents, and like, for example, this song right here kind of has a amber look to it. We want to have our lights automatically change when they click on the first slide of that song. They can simply drag and drop this amber macro. I like how it preserves the color of the macro, so you just know that, you know, when you're looking at your macro bin, whichever one you have labeled with the orange here is the one that I have here on this slide. You know, then let's say I had a different lighting scene that I wanted to kick in at the chorus. Then when they click on the chorus, it's going to change colors to that lighting scene. This is so much easier than having to go into a slide, right click, go add action, communication, lighting, our eye connectivity device, MIDI note on, and then have to go in here and find the right note, the right intensity, all of that stuff. So much easier than going through all those steps. It's not a new concept that ProPresenter can send MIDI commands to other applications. They've had this for a while. I've even been automating ProPresenter with Ableton Live and my tracks rig for a long time. But to be able to put this all in a playlist of macros like this, to have your, basically in effect, I'm like labeling my MIDI commands right here. That's all I'm doing with these macros, very simple. But that just saves so much time not having to click 10 times to just find the right MIDI note. So I'm a big fan of that. Then we have some macros here that are automated by our calendar to pull up our countdown props. So we're actually using a prop layer right now to pull up our service countdown. I'll go ahead and just make this a little bit bigger so you can see what's going on. So let's say that we are, you know, before the service right now, we got this loop going on in ProPresenter. I've got it automated, so now at, I think, 8:30, the first service countdown, you can see the little calendar icon right here. ProPresenter is going to automate that. It's going to pull up our prop layer, which is playing back our service begins in, and then we have a placeholder here for a countdown timer right here. So I've got these two timers in here, and then we're using the prop layer to actually add in those timers into what you actually see on the screens. But rather than having to worry about someone come in here and start timers and to cue a prop layer, I've got this set up so that when I go to the calendar feature here within ProPresenter, I can have these different countdown cues set up that happen every single Sunday, one for the first service, and then one for the 10:45 service. And then you see here under action at that time, every single Sunday morning, that's where I'm adding in my macro. So very slick stuff. And then as I mentioned earlier, we're using another instance of ProPresenter on the computer over there, which is actually this computer right here. So if I switch my screen here to the other display, you'll see this is just a very simple use of ProPresenter, and this is just going to throw up images, background videos onto our center screen that we have behind the band. It just gives us independent control of the content behind the band from the side screens. I know you can use looks and different screens within one instance of ProPresenter, but we wanted to have even more independence in that, you know, we want to have a completely different background on the back center screen than we do on the side screen. So if you're trying to figure out how to do this, we found that this works pretty well. But we want to be able to easily automate these slide changes that are happening on our center screen. So we got this simple center screen document that has 10 or so slides on it. Yeah, 10 slides. So then over here in our main instance of ProPresenter that runs all of our lyrics and everything, you'll see I have 10 macros that are simply just sending MIDI commands to this other instance of ProPresenter to queue up these center screen looks. So you see here, if I hit slide 2, it's going to move over to this. If I go to slide 3, the pink one, slide 4, the purple, slide 5, back to pink. So again, as I'm building out ProPresenter documents week to week, or Adam or whoever else is building those here, Aaron sometimes, instead of having to like remember MIDI notes, because we do so much MIDI automation, I know that, okay, great things. I'm going to use this orange slide right here on the other computer. So that's slide number 2. I'm just going to drag it on here, and then it's going to automatically add in that macro. So when I hit that song, not only will it queue up the right lights and light key, but it's also going to queue up the right center screen slide here in ProPresenter. So that's how we're currently using macros in ProPresenter. I know we're really just scratching the surface of them right now, but already they're saving us a ton of time being able to add in these automations. Let's talk about a few other use cases with macros. One thing that you could do is you could actually use MIDI from an external device like Ableton or Playback or your tracks rig, and then you can actually queue up macros within ProPresenter. Because if I go into my preferences, if I go to devices and I go to my MIDI mapping, you'll see now that there's actually a spot here for triggering different macros from external devices. So that's pretty awesome. I could also use my Stream Deck that I have right here and trigger macros from the Stream Deck. I also think macros are going to come in handy for those of you who are using ProPresenter not only for presentation, but also for your live streaming computer, because you even have a lot more things going on within your ProPresenter projects, and it adds a whole other layer of cues that need to happen, like queuing up your live video input, making sure you have the right looks going to even more screens in some cases. So I think you're going to find this just a really powerful feature for even automating what needs to happen with your live stream. So I'd love to hear from you guys. What ideas are you implementing with this new macros feature in ProPresenter 7? Because like I said, I know I'm only scratching the surface of this in our current use case, still saving us a ton of time, but I want to hear what you guys are doing. We can kind of share ideas here in the community down in the comments. As I was building out macros, one thing I would like to see in the future is maybe an update to the software where they allow you to create different folders or playlists of macros, because you can see here I've got a pretty big list of macros and I'm kind of categorizing the different type of macros that I have. So it'd be nice if they could just like drop down into some folders and stuff, just so it doesn't get out of hand with a super long list of macros. Honestly, similar, if they could just do a similar thing to what they have here with the audio playlists and then the songs, I would love to see the same idea with like macro playlist and then the individual macros down here. The other idea I had is, what if you could somehow trigger a document from a macro? And maybe you can do this and I'm just missing something, but if I could add an action that automatically pulled up a specific document in the library, I think that could come in handy sometimes. Like for example, we always have the same document that we use for our scrolling announcements. So it'd be cool if whoever is running it here, if they quickly needed to get to scrolling announcements, instead of having to like click here, which I guess that's not very hard to do, they could just like queue up an actual document as well from a macro. I don't know. If that doesn't make sense, then maybe it wouldn't. I guess the more I talk about it, the less it makes sense. But I think that could be a handy feature if we could also pull up a document with a macro. While we're talking about MIDI automation between ProPresenter and Lightkey and other applications, I wanted to mention the iConnectivity interfaces. So we're actually using the iConnectivity Audio 4 Plus. I think that's discontinued now. Actually, I know it is because that web page brought me to this page. These are the most recent MIDI interfaces they have here. If I click on MIDI interface here, maybe it's actually the Mio XM is the actual update for the Play Audio 4, because the other ones did audio interfacing. This one you just need a MIDI interface. I would check out the iConnectivity Mio interfaces. And what's cool is it's a hardware way to send MIDI from one computer to another. You're not dealing with your local area network or Wi-Fi or anything like that. So it's just going to be more reliable. You don't have to restart network sessions. So I've really been a big fan of iConnectivity gear for a few years now. And this reminded me of it because we're just having headaches with the audio MIDI network app with Mac, and we've resolved those headaches now with this hardware interface. So the interface is just down below the tech booth table, and then both computers are plugged into the interface via USB, and then basically that interface just functions as the MIDI device that's going to send MIDI to and from all the apps and all the computers that are plugged into it. You can plug up to 3 computers into one interface. And then also the interfaces can network together too, so you can use RTMP. So if you're gonna go heavy with lots of MIDI automation, check that out. And finally, I wanna invite you to check out all of our online courses and our coaching program at Worship Ministry School. Maybe you see technology like this, like ProPresenter, like MIDI automation, it feels a little bit overwhelming. I don't blame you, it was for me. That's why we created our programs at Worship Ministry School. We've got in-depth, comprehensive courses, and then you can hop on coaching calls with members of our team. We do it over Zoom video, so it's basically like we are just there looking over your shoulder, helping you navigate the latest technology for worship. So check all the links down below this video to learn more. Check out this new ProPresenter 7 update. Big shout out and thanks to the guys at Renewed Vision for the hard work that they do. Definitely makes our lives easier as worship ministry leaders. If you found this video helpful, smash like, share it with your friends, and I'll see you next time.